Okay, I'm gonna start my story off like this. 3 months prior to me being born, my father got buried alive in a construction accident. I was born July the 4th, 1973. Uh, he rode for a motorcycle group called the Outlaws, and he worked construction. They was digging a pipeline, and the foundation caved in and buried him alive. My mother, she was addicted to heroin and lived a rough lifestyle. Uh, she flew to upstate to be with some of my father's biker friends, but the reason she fled is after she gave birth to me, she had robbed a liquor store trying to support her heroin addiction and got caught. And to get out of some of her time, she told on some of my father's biker friends and told them on some charges they had committed. Well, they caught wind of her telling, and they came to where we live. We lived in a apartment complex. It had 2 apartments on the bottom and 2 on the top, and they strapped dynamite around it and blew it to the ground. And by the grace of God, she had that day had gone to the neighbor's house to bum a pack of cigarettes, and no sooner than she walked out the back door of the apartments, they blew it up. And she got scared and flew upstate, and staying with some of my father's that had passed away's friends. I don't know if it's out of fear that they'd find out what she done or what possessed her, but she went to the store one day to get some cigarettes and beer and left me there and never came back. Well, they contacted my father's parents. They flew upstate and got me and adopted me. My grandparents never told me that they was any different than my parents. They wanted to tell me the older I got, but they seen that I was a little wilder. I was, as she would say, special, but I was unruly, and they thought that if they told me that they was my grandparents instead of my parents, I wouldn't listen as much. So I was into everything and anything I could get into. I remember being young, we would go to my Uncle Ern's, and all my family was older, and I could never really put a finger on that and figure it out. And we would go to Uncle Ern's that lived in Blue Goose, Tennessee, and he had goats. And one day I got out there in the shed while they was all inside talking and eating, and found an old football helmet, and I strapped it on. I remember days of getting down with those goats and getting eye level, and I'd let the goats headbutt me. So that's just a little example of some of the things that I used to get into when I was younger. And through the years I got older, and I had some bad influences in my family. By the age of 12, I had done started smoking marijuana, and that progressed into drinking, heavier drugs. In school, I played sports. I was real good at football and baseball, and I played Babe Ruth, Little League, junior high football, high school, and I'd also became good at lying. I'd always lie to my parents. I'd lie to people around me. I wanted everybody to like me. I cared what others think about me. And a lot of times I worried about the bad influences, what they thought, instead of the good. And my coaches would always ask why my eyes was so red. And I'd lie and say, it's my allergies. I have allergies. And of course I had done prepared this lie by telling my grandparents I had bad allergies, to the point they had even carried me to the doctor and got me on medication. And well, remember this day I had gone out in the parking lot with some of my friends and smoked weed and got high and come in, and that my defensive coach asked me, "What is that smell?" "I smell a strong odor from you." Of course, I lied and said it was cigarettes. Well, they carried me out to the Milan emergency room, escorted by the police to take a drug test. I get to the hospital, and I remember thinking in my head all the way, how am I going to lie my way out of this one? And I go in there and I tell the nurse, I said, "Ma'am, I'm in trouble." I said, "Could you take this drug test for me?" And I remember her saying, "I most certainly will not." And I knew right then I was in trouble because I had a nurse that I thought was a square. And so I go into the bathroom, and not knowing about taking drug tests, I dip my cup into the commode and come back out and set it down. And she said, "Well, we got a problem." I said, "Yes, ma'am. What is it?" And she said, "Either you're a Smurf or you dipped this cup in the commode," and because it was still blue from the dye they had put in the toilet. And I had no idea what that dye was for. And so I went back in the bathroom and I took the test and come back and gave it to her. And she said, "Well, the results will come back in 2 weeks." And I remember riding home with my mother and her saying, "We're going to show them this is going to come back clean because you ain't doing no drugs, are you?" I said, "No, ma'am." Once again, lying and thinking how I was going to come up with the way out of this. And the 2 weeks come, and I got the test results back, and I tested positive for marijuana and methamphetamine. 3 days after that, my grandma, which I knew, as I said, is nothing but my mother, she had her first stroke. It tore our family apart. A lot of my family blamed me for being the reason that drove her to having a stroke. And in 2 weeks I came back, and this didn't make the situation any better. They notified my family that I had tested positive for marijuana and methamphetamine. Well, that was really hard on my grandparents. They said, my coaches, because I was good at sports, said, "Here's a solution. You can go to a 30-day outpatient." I went to a 30-day outpatient, come back to school, and they treated me different. Before, when they let me just sit in the corner and read a magazine and pass me because I was good in sports, they started making me do my homework, and that became a problem because I didn't know how. And still to this day can't spell too good. I went home and told my parents that I didn't want to be there no more. I wanted to quit school, and they said that's not going to happen. So I said, "Can I go to Bradford?" And Bradford didn't even have a football team. And they said, "Yeah." So I quit Milan and went to Bradford. And just in a few months of being there, what I thought was a good situation was really worse. The level of drugs, the level of acceptance of drugs was a lot higher there. I finished out my sophomore year and started my junior year. And as I told you, I worried about what a lot of people thought about me. I fought a lot in school. I fought all the time, either defending myself or defending others. And I had got a reputation. So I get in an argument one day at this pep rally over my girlfriend. And the guy talked pretty bad to me, and the fellas that I was sitting with was saying, "Todd, you gonna let him talk to you like that?" And I said, "No. When this pep rally's over, I'm gonna show you." And so the pep rally was over. Me and that guy got into a fight, and I hurt him really bad. I put 22 stitches across his forehead where I had picked him up and slammed his head on the concrete floor. And I went in a rage. I was high on meth that day. Luckily, I had some friends that stopped me, or I'd have probably killed him. And Coach Patterson was there that day. And Mr. Patterson just told me to, if I had a shirt to change in, go to my car and get my shirt and change and come back to class. And I was thinking, man, Marlon would have kicked me out. But I went back to class that day, and all of the excitement, and they ain't never seen a fight and that drama that violent. And I went home, didn't tell my mom, tried to hide it from her. Next day, put in a parking lot, and Dale Denning, the principal of the school, was standing on the porch waiting on me. Told me, you can get back in your car, Todd. So come back in 2 weeks and bring your parents. Well, I did, and they carried me in front of what they called a West Tennessee Special Board meeting. They kicked me out of West Tennessee school system altogether. Our family would have had to either move to Middle Tennessee, East Tennessee, or another state. And that wasn't going to happen. And so that was my last day of school. And my father sat me down and said, if you want to act like a man, if you want to act grown, you're going to have to work or you can't live in this house. So I started working at a factory called Kelwood in Greenfield. And that just fueled my struggle, my addiction. I progressed in selling drugs. I was around adults. I just spiraled out of control. I didn't live at home no more. I moved out of home, but I still kept my job, and my drinking and addiction just got worse. And I remember I turned 18. I come to see my parents, and my grandma, bless her heart, she was a saint. She'd always make me a red velvet cake, and when I come in that day, they was crying. And she told me, sit down, Todd. We need to talk to you. First thing I worried about was my brother that was closest to me. And I said, is Keith okay? And she said, yeah, your brother's fine. We need to tell you something. I said, what's going on? And she said, we're not your parents. We're your grandparents. The one you thought was your oldest brother, he was your father. He got buried alive in that construction accident. And here is $89,000. This is your insurance policy from where your father got killed. I didn't know what to think. They also said, we don't know where your mother is, and still to this day, I don't know whatever happened to her or where she was. At first, I tried to do right. I bought a new car. I had plans of buying land, buying a house, and my plans never flourished. I got introduced to crack cocaine. I was then taking crack, meth, acid, and you name it, I done it. I even took an overdose of LSD and ate a pod, a seed that grows wild called Jimson seed. And this made me so paranoid and crazy that I ended up going to the mental institution in Bolivar. I was in a suicide precaution and drug ward. And it was the first time I seen my father cry that I can remember. He pretty much thought I had fried my brain. And it's God's grace that I didn't. I had to stay in there 60 days. I went through all kinds of stuff in there. By the grace of God, they gave me medication, and I come out of my hallucinogenic paranoid, schizophrenic state. And I had to still be in there around other people that had gone crazy because they taken too many drugs. And I had quite a few experiences in there. There was one where I was walking the unit one day, and there was an older black gentleman dressed up in army fatigue, and as we walked, he bumped into me. And I, first of all, said, "Excuse you." And he just gritted at me, just grit his teeth, and said, "Okay." And he bumped me again a few minutes later as we walked by. I said, "Listen, you bump me one more time, I'm going to bust your head." I was 18, strong, not scared of nothing. He just looked at me crazy and never bumped me again. Well, that night, when I went to sleep, we had 4 people that slept in the unit, and we had a chest of drawer that sat beside our bed. And I went to sleep, woke up in the morning, and I want you to see this. They had monitor systems everywhere. There's supposed to always be a staff watching the rooms. I woke up that morning to grab a pair of socks to put them on. They pulled all the way up my knee. And I thought, man, this is weird. I grabbed another pair, same thing. I looked and every toe had been cutting out of my socks. Well, I walked barefooted into the unit, into the dorm, and there he sat and had took the toes of my socks and sewed them together and made a headband like Rambo. Needless to say, I was scared to death. I called my mom and said, "Get me out of here." But I still had to stay through the evaluation, stayed 60 days. Did I let that stop me from my drugs and addiction? No. I still had a lot of money left and a lot of partying to do. And I got out and partied and smoked crack and drugs till I ended up selling my car, had lost everything I had, all my money. And then being easily influenced,